Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and several cards. Altenew's December 2024 release has gone live. It is, as usual, a fabulous release, and I'll have many videos coming using different products. Today, I focused on the Dreamy Dahlias Build-A-Garden set because large floral. If you're new here, hey, welcome to the chaos. I love large floral images. Always have, always will. They'll never get old to me. And Altenew has definitely some of the biggest. Some of their sets are absolutely enormous. This one, no exception. It's a 6x8 set, and this floral is huge. So if you like doing bigger cards too, I generally tend to stick to A2 size cards, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. It's just what I like. It's my little comfort place. But if you like doing like bigger cards, 5x7, etc., that's where the large florals can really come into play too, because they've got, a good size to them. So anyway, I am concentrating on that set. I'm going to use a couple of the new press plates as well without using my better press. Just add texture. It's fun. And I'm going to do some monochromatic ink blending. Another thing I don't do very often, but they released more colors of their fresh dye inks, and these two quads, that's what I concentrated on. And I did all my blending with those. Did some custom splatter, so that was kind of fun too. And yeah, so as always, I will have links to everything I used in the description box below the video. I will also link to the new release so you can check out all the new products. So all of that will be in the description box below. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It is what helps pay the bills, keeps the heaters going, enables me to keep bringing out content. And yeah, that's it for the housekeeping. Let's get into the card making. Alrighty, so this is the Altenew Build-A-Garden Dreamy Dahlias stamp set. It comes as a bundle. So there's the stamp set with the coordinating layered stencil set and a blending brush. And then there is also the add-on option of the coordinating wafer dies. I'll have links, like always, to all the things, all the options. And yeah, the stamp is big. I'm using my Stampwheel 2.0, and this piece of cardstock is full size, so 8.5 by 11 inches, just to give you an idea of the size of this. And I used my anti-static powder tool on the cardstock, and I am stamping this image with Altenew's Obsidian Pigment ink. And for me, and this cardstock, because this is Simon Says Stamp smooth white cardstock, I find that I need to heat emboss this ink. Pretty much most inks that take longer to dry, etc., because this cardstock is very, very smooth. And I just find even with heat setting, I can't get the ink to not smear, but I also just prefer heat setting. I've talked about this before. Any sort of the Altenew Obsidian ink, love it. VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink, ones like that. I prefer to just use embossing powder with them because, one, I'm impatient always, and two, it just saves me any grief because it's just what I end up doing. I end up smearing things. So I had taken the side out of the stamp wheel there, had stamped the image, flipped the cardstock around so I could stamp it a second time. So now you can kind of see, like, the stamp is big. I love it. And I'm coating it with Wow's Clear Matte Dull embossing powder. The only difference between this and just your regular clear embossing powder is that as you're melting it, it'll look shiny. The second it cools off, it turns matte. And so then it doesn't look, you actually can't really tell that it's heat embossed at all. Yeah, I like it. I like doing this sometimes for things like this where I don't feel the need for the clear embossing powder, or it just kind of depends on my mood. Sometimes it's fun to not have that shiny finish. So I coated those images with the matte dull embossing powder, melting that with my heat tool. And I did this more than once. I just didn't bother filming it because, you know, I've got the stamp already lined up, cardstock, everything's sitting out. Why not? So after I had heat embossed the main images, I trimmed them out just quickly with my scissors because I'll use the cording weave die. And all the leftover bits, I stamped sentiments from that same Dreamy Dahlias stamp set, the big sentiments from the set, with the same ink. Those I heat embossed with just clear embossing powder. So that way it kind of used up all the scraps, plus it just got all, like, I now have like a little pile of sentiments to use on today's cards as well as future ones I'm working on. So got all the stamping done, heat embossed everything. Now I'm going to use the coordinating stencils. And I've got my ultra sticky mats, my Altenew ones, and I keep mine in mesh bags. This was a trick I picked up from Lydia Evans over at Altenew. Game changer. So this is the OG sticky mat. This is the one that's meant for the original stamp wheel, like the slightly smaller one. I have a couple of these, and then I have the bigger Altenew one. For what I was doing today, this actually worked perfectly, having two of these. You don't need two. You don't need multiples. You know, I end up with like extras of so many things. Sometimes because I buy them, other times because they're sent to me. I had purchased like a second one of these back before I started getting like all the grip mats. So you can see the one that I've used a lot is very, very stained. The grip mats will stain. It's fine. You know, they're well loved. It's all good. So I've got my images and I have the inks. I'm using the Tranquility quad here, and I stuck them all into little ink stands. These are made by Brienne. Love my little ink stands. They've got little feet on the bottom of them so they don't slide around. And I'd got a round one when I first started getting into the Altenew fresh dye inks. And then the more I started using the inks and really liking them, I purchased 3 more so that I have a set of 4, because so often I'm using all 4 colors, you know, in a quad. So yeah, I've got my little station set up, and now we just get to blend in. So I'm going to just kind of work lightest to darkest using the coordinating stencils. I showed there at the beginning, I opened up the insert from the stamp set, and it has the layering guide for the stencils. This is another one of those times where it's pretty simple to line these up. Like, even without the layering guide, it just makes sense. You can't really see it on camera, but and this is true for a lot of the Altenew stencil sets. On the stencil itself, like, there'll be a number, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And then they'll kind of be like, you know, sort of almost like wavy etch lines to separate different areas. So on here, the top portion is the first kind of set of petals on the 2 florals. And then the bottom portion of the stencil is the other couple portions. So you just move the stencil. Again, it ends up, everything just kind of fits. It just works. And then the bottom little corner of this does the little bud. So I'm using Altenew's mini blending brushes. You do get one with this bundle, which is pretty sweet. That's how I've been slowly building up my brush collection of these with these bundles. It's like, ooh, love it. And yeah, I did all of like this with one brush. And that's also why I worked kind of lightest to darkest. And then I've just got a microfiber cloth off to the side. So when I'm like jumping back and forth between colors, I just rub the brush on the cloth. I've talked about this before. I don't wash any of my brushes. I don't have the time or the patience or anything. I just wipe brushes off on a microfiber cloth. And the cloths, those I'll wash. I'll do a load of I have separate ones that I keep just for in my craft room. You know, and once enough of them are dirty, I'll wash them all on their own because I don't want to get ink, etc. in all our clothes. So anyhow, I did all of this blending, which I've talked about this. Like, I love large florals, obviously. And I love coloring. You know, I love to watercolor. I like to use like all the different coloring methods. I very much enjoy. But there is something about stencil sets that I find so therapeutic, and it's just satisfying. Like the smooth blend, all the things, I really enjoy it. That doesn't mean I'm ever going to give up on like actually coloring things, and a set like this, oh, these stamps would be really pretty watercolored. As always, I need more hours in the day. But anyway, I really love the blending. Like, just, I don't know, it's really satisfying. So for the actual petals, I'd use the 2 lightest shades. So that was Misty Morning and Cloudy Sky. Then for the greenery portion of these images, I'm using the two darkest shades, which is Nimbus and Dark Night. And kind of worked all my way to the darkest, which was for the stems. And with this stencil set, and again, this kind of applies to a lot of the ones that Altenew does, is you could stop here. You know, everything's filled in. It looks fabulous. The final stencil adds another layer of details. And that's where you could choose, like, whether you want to use them or not. I love using the details. I always tell myself, like, oh, you could leave it here. You know, it looks great. Everything's, you know, smooth and blended and fabulous. But I really do love the details. It just amps it up. But yeah, you could leave it or you could use it. Options. Always a nice thing. So for the details on the petals, I used the second lightest shade, Cloudy Sky, and then added a little bit of the darker shade of Nimbus, kind of more towards the centers. So it just, and the minute I take the stencil off, it's like, oh, I love that detail. This I would have a harder time achieving coloring on my own. You know, that's another reason why I like the stencils, because I was like, ooh, I would never think to add like the darker areas like that, you know, with markers or whatever. So then with the leaves, same thing. There's all the detailed bits. And for that, I used the very darkest shade, which was the dark night shade. And this one isn't as obvious on camera. I didn't film the other quad. I'll show them. But it's what I say about like letting things dry. These inks especially, they do soften and dry back. Again, this quad you don't notice as much. I really noticed it with the browns that I use because I had to redo one of them. So what you're seeing now, everything is dry. So even you can kind of tell like the detail is softened, especially on those petals, because everything's dried back. So I use the other quad on these ones. This is the Delectable Delights quad. Very vintage looking. Not something you guys see from me very often, but I really liked how these turned out. They were a lot of fun. And I did the exact same thing, just using those 4 colors. So I'd done all of that. And then there's these 2 press plates that are part of this release. I am loving Altenew's these like background press plates, because now I'm not sure how many are available now. I love them. I've gone on about it. I really love press plates. I love like pressing them with the better press, hot foiling them, doing things like this. So all I did was I'm using my Empress machine, and to get this like really awesome texture with these plates, it's 1 cutting plate, the texture plate face up, cardstock, and again I'm using Simon Says Stamp's 120 pound smooth white cardstock. So the cutting plate, the better press plate, the cardstock, the tan rubber mat that comes with the machine, and the cutting plate. And then you run that through, and it just presses in all that detail, and it is just chef's kiss. Really hard to show on camera because it's just, you know, white cardstock, but like look at that detail. This made me really happy. Because yeah, I've got, you know, with the florals, everything, I didn't want to add ink these. You could try it though. I thought about that because I was like, ooh, if you added ink and then just set the cardstock on and ran it through in the same sandwich I showed, if you didn't have a better press, still love my better press. The actual better press does not work in the Empress, but it is an idea. I haven't had time. Again, y'all, if somebody can invent more hours in a day, preferably an extra couple days in a week, life would be great. Anywho, so I pressed the cardstocks with those 2 background plates, which was the Essential Textures Stone Wall and the Essential Textures Terrazzo. And in future videos, I'm sure I will be hot foiling these things, inking them up. Oh, so many fun things. So, also off camera, I actually messed up one of the brown florals. You can't tell really, but when I was die cutting, my plate wasn't clean. It pressed ink, it ruined it. I wasn't happy. So I redid it. But I salvaged the one that I messed up, and that's what's adhered to that panel right in the middle of the screen there. I just took the bits and pieces I was able to salvage from it. There was still a bit of like smears on it, etc. Didn't care because you're not going to see it. I'm covering it up with other stuff, and of course we're going to add splatter. So that's why I have more florals than what I showed originally, because I made an oopsie and then I re-stamped, re-embossed, And in the end, that actually helped because then I've got, all these little extra bits, which I salvage when I'm adhering them. And then I did one more combo, which I'll show a little later. So I did a combination of just adhering some of these floral bits with just craft tacky glue to these pressed backgrounds. And then the other florals, like the main ones, I popped up with Altenew's foam tape. And you saw me, I would hold the floral on the background, just like so. I flip it over, and then I'm using a pencil to mark where the edges of the cardstock are. That way I have just a visual guide of where to add the foam tape, so I don't have to trim through bits of foam tape. It keeps everything a little cleaner, a little easier, and also it just makes it easier to adhere. Because after I've got the foam tape in place, I peel off, and then I just press the background using those pencil lines as my guide, just like so. And then I can flip it around and trim off the excess. And yeah, in the end, I ended up getting 5 cards out of all of this. So I just kept doing this over and over again. Did everything in steps, like I always do, especially when I'm doing multiples. So, and then after I do, like with this one, once I get this piece adhered into place, snip off that excess. I then take things like those leaves that are left over. I can, trim them out and then glue them to the background, just filling in little areas. And I don't mind. Like if I just trimmed it off, left it, it's fine. But yeah, it just kind of worked with these to just tuck them in. So that's what I kept doing. And then I would just, again, flip it over, trim off the excess, and then go on to the next step. So I worked my way through all of these backgrounds and got everything adhered, and then we're going to add splatter. So for the splatter, I'm using my enormous tube of Altenew white gouache, which I showed in whenever I bought it like forever ago, and I was laughing about it because this tube is enormous. But now that this works, I was pretty sure this was going to work, but I was literally testing it out on camera. I smushed the darkest brown ink, which was milk chocolate, onto my little palette, added some of the white gouache and a teeny bit of water, and then swirled it together with my fan brush, and then I've got gouache in the color I want. So I'm actually quite glad that these tubes of gouache are so enormous. The oldest white one, and then there's the black one that I've used in other videos as well. Because now I'm just going to tint it to the colors I want. You can splatter just the ink, but there's something about the gouache. The splatters look better. It's a weird little hang up I have. I prefer the look. So I used my little fan brush, splattered that on the background, and then did the same thing with the blue cards, but this time I'm using the darkest blue shade, which is Dark Night. The only thing to remember, obviously, is even though I'm using such dark shades of ink, because it's being added to white gouache, it's going to lighten it considerably. It's just something to keep in mind, because if you want this to get really, really dark, it's going to start getting a little more difficult, and then it's really going to thin it out, etc. But I just wanted it to be just a nice blue shade, and oh, this one is nice. So, splattered this one, and then my bonus card, what I did with that one is I did the florals with the blue shades of ink, and then the greenery I did with the browns. Not something I would normally think of on my own, but I was really concentrating on just sticking to these 2 ink quads when making this, and it just works. And again, if I'd had more time in the day, I would have done the florals in the brown shades and the greenery in blue. Why not? Have fun with it. So added the blue splatter to that one. And then for all the insides of my cards, I'm using one of the alignment guides that you can get for the stamp wheel. This will just make my life easier because I've got all my card bases, which are top folding A2 white note cards, and had the alignment guide there so I can center the card base. This will be the inside of the card using that guide. And then I can line up this big old stamp, which I've cleaned off. And I'm going to stamp this with the lightest shade of ink onto the insides of the cards. So for the first 2, I'm going to use the Vanilla Cream, which was the lightest shade. So ink that up, stamp that on the inside. Then I can remove that card base, stick in the next one. It's already lined up. So all I got to do is ink up the stamp, press that onto the inside of the card, and then continue. So the first 2 will be for the brown ones. I'm going to clean everything off, and then I'm going to use the lightest blue shade, which is Misty Morning. And I'm going to stamp that onto the insides of 3 more card bases. And then after I had stamped these off camera, I stamped companion sentiments from that stamp set, because it's got a bunch of the big chunky sentiments, and then it's got a bunch of little sub sentiments and whatnot. So I took a bunch of those and stamped them onto the inside with the black ink, and I'll just show the insides at the end of the video. So that's going to finish off all of the insides of the cards. Again, and this is something, if you wanted to do like a card set, more clean and simple, you could just stamp the insides. Or stamp like the card front, I mean, with like color ink, add a sentiment, and you're good to go. So that's how I finished off all the insides. Those sentiments that I'd stamped and heat embossed, I die cut them. There's coordinating wafer dies for the big sentiments, so I had die cut them, and then I just adhered them with craft tacky glue, and that was it. I decided not to add any other embellishments, anything, because I've got, you know, these great big huge florals, the texture of the background, splatter, you know, I filled these cards with all the bits and pieces of these florals. So I decided not to add anything else. And that finished them all off. So, like I mentioned in the intro, I will have links to all of the things in the description box below the video. So if you just expand the description box, they'll all be there listed and linked for your convenience. And, oh, also check out my Instagram, because I'm part of a hop for this release. So look for these pictures on my Instagram. My Instagram will also be linked directly below the video, so you can check it out. There's giveaways, tons of inspiration, all the fun things. You can check that out if you are interested. As always, thank you all so very much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping and commenting. It literally helps a ton, and I very much appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!